Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome inside the Guilty as Charged podcast, coming to you live on a Wednesday evening ahead of the Chargers' regular season finale against the Denver Broncos. So, obviously, a lot to cover today, a lot to discuss. Great conversation started right away from Mr. Peter in the chat. But, I digress. We'll have a great conversation today about the Chargers' path to the fifth seed, as well as trying our best to cover this preseason-esque game with the Broncos. We'll obviously dive into all of that here in a second, but joining me are my guys Tyler and Alex. Tyler, what's up, man? How you doing tonight?
Doing pretty well. Had a nice set of conversations today. Exciting things are afoot, perhaps.
Yeah, if you are not in our Discord, I think you missed out on some pretty great information today from Tyler and some of his great investigating over the past couple of days. So if you are not in the Discord, you can obviously find the links to that in the description wherever you are listening or watching this. All you have to do is be a member or patron at a certain tier, and you'll get access to the Discord. So hop on over there, get lots of great conversations, great information from us as we get it. So Alex is here as well, man. Alex, what's up? How you doing tonight?
Doing good. I don't digress. I am glad to hear that Peter has started his evening dump in the YouTube group chat. So I'm glad that somewhere around the world, wherever you're listening from, that the three of us can be with you in this tender moment in the bathroom. So glad that we can be a part of your bathroom break.
Yeah, I had an info dump, and you're having a dump.
A dump.
It's a dump. It's a dumping evening, I guess.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah, I guess.
Yes. So, like I said, if you are interested in that information, you can feel free and find that in the Discord. So that's where we prefer to keep it. So you can obviously go check that out. So, obviously, a bit of a different show, like I mentioned. Lots of uncertainty around the status of this game in terms of who's going to play, who's going to be resting. So first and foremost, we're going to dive into the playoff scenario here. Obviously, the Chargers, because of the way everything has kind of played out in the AFC, no matter what, they will be at least the 6th seed. However, if they win against the Denver Broncos or the Ravens lose against the Cincinnati Bengals, the Chargers would be the 5 seed. So obviously, the Ravens and the Bengals will kick off. They're the early game, so 10 a.m. here for the West Coasters, or 1 p.m. for the East Coasters. And then the Chargers and Broncos will kick off a few hours after that. So after basically the Chargers will know their future in terms of playoff seeding by the time the Ravens and the Bengals game ends, and they have to kick off. So Brandon Staley has already came out and said today that it sounds like they are planning to play obviously a lot of their key players, but they will make an adjustment if need be. So essentially, they're going to go into this game with 2 different plans. So, Alex, we'll start with you here. If the Ravens lose, where are you at? Or who are you resting? Are you resting anybody? What's kind of the mindset for you if the Ravens do end up losing on Sunday morning?
The whole team. Let's do Chase Daniel, Larry Roundtree, Brendan Hymas. Just put them all in there, and we can treat this like it's a preseason game. I think there is like a bit of hesitancy amongst fans whenever you just like rest everyone, right? Because there's sort of the the Packers last year in the playoffs where you rest everyone for a certain amount of time. But I don't know. I mean, I don't think the Chargers have to worry about that much. And the more that you get a chance to rest your guys, like that can only be advantageous in the grand scheme of things. And based on the Chargers, if they clinch the 5 seed, I would bet are more than likely playing the first game on Saturday against the winner of the AFC South than playing Sunday. So, I mean, getting that rest anyway for your starters would be a good idea. And, obviously you can't go into this game. You don't have a 90-man roster. You can't rest everyone if the Ravens lose, right? But you can play things out where, maybe Herbert plays for a quarter or half. Maybe you kind of start with Eckler in the first couple series and then, give it to Kelly and Roundtree as the game sort of goes on, and do the same thing sort of with the defensive players. Obviously, everyone is in a bit of a different situation too, right? You have Joey Bosa, who, is coming back from injury, trying to get more reps, or you have somebody like Trey Pipkins who's been kind of managing that sprained MCL throughout the year, so that's somebody who might need rest a little bit more, right, than Joey Bosa, who is actively trying to get more reps. So in the event that they lose to or the Ravens lose, I should say, then I think that you try to, be as cautious as you can and pull as many guys as you can. But obviously, you can't really make it like a rest everyone kind of game either. So I think the Chargers will kind of walk the fine line and really present two game plans potentially going into that game, one where the Ravens obviously do beat the Bengals and the Chargers still have to play that game for the 5th seed, and another one in which they can, kind of tone down the aggressiveness throughout the game, maybe start through with a quarter or a half or a series of drives that they have planned, and then kind of figure out what their benching plan is in the event that the Ravens do lose. So, I think the Chargers and Brandon Staley kind of signified in his press conference today they'll go with it as it goes.
Yeah, I think Alex covered all that perfectly. Brandon Staley indicated, this is from Jeff Miller, that the result of the Ravens game Sunday will impact how the Chargers approach their regular season finale versus Denver. I think for Brandon Staley to already come out and say that, because I feel like he's someone, even with Joey Bosa, it's like, oh, no update. And the next day, oh yeah, he's back. He's practicing. He's a guy who's kind of kept it very close to the chest. But for this one, he's like, yeah, no, if basically saying if the Bengals win, that changes everything. So I think, like Alex said, they'll have 2 different, or maybe 3 different scenarios depending on what happens with that game. Although they won't know really. So someone mentioned like you have to announce inactives like an hour and a half before kickoff or whatever it is. Right. I believe that's still the limit. So they'll probably just have to have everyone they expect, to play like it's a real game active. But regardless, it's huge because I know, they're probably not going to rest everyone for the entire game. But, the Titans and Jaguars play on Saturday, and the Chargers will, unless something weird happens, they're playing one of those 2 teams on the road. And the Chargers would go from, the team that has like 6 or 7 days potentially of rest, after a tough road win in Denver division matchup, to one that has starters who get to rest for, as far back as potentially New Year's Day, and a game at home that wasn't all that physical. So it's really, really big for them because instead of the Titans or Jaguars potentially being the team that maybe gets that extra day of rest, now it's the Chargers who, for most of their starters, either they get, almost 2 weeks worth of rest since the New Year's Day game, or they play like, a quarter, maybe a half or something, and are much more rested to go on the road. So it's huge for them that the Bengals win, of course, and then we'll see what happens with their strategy after that game.
Yeah, so against the Rams, it was kind of load management for a few players. Khalil Mack did not play, anywhere close to his usual snaps. Sebastian Joseph Day as well, and that was kind of from the jump. It didn't really seem like there were many offensive players that were getting that same kind of treatment. So I almost wonder from an offensive standpoint if it's better for this team to try and at least play the starters for a half and continue to try and, improve upon last week's success, even if you already know that the Ravens are kind of wrapped up, or if you have already the 5 seed wrapped up, excuse me. And so that's kind of where my head is at. I think from a defensive standpoint, you can probably head into this one and say, hey, like, we're just not going to play Sebastian Joseph Day. We're not going to play Khalil Mack. Derwin James, who's obviously had the concussion recently, we're not going to play him. But I do think it is important to approach this game, from an offensive perspective and say, hey, like, we haven't played our best ball. We need to at least go out here and have a very successful first half. And that's just kind of where my head is at. I think obviously you're a little bit concerned about certain players and some health. Obviously, Austin Eckler has been a little bit banged up. Trey Pipkins has been a little bit banged up. So I would understand if they headed into this game and said, hey, like, we're going to rest all these guys, obviously assuming the Ravens do lose. But I kind of, like Jorge is pointing out, I do think that from an offensive perspective, they still need some fine tuning. So that's just kind of where my head is at least on offense. I do think that they kind of need to continue to build off of last week, as opposed to just heading into this and saying, hey, we're just going to rest all the veterans who are kind of spoken for at this point.
Yeah, that absolutely works for me. I had went back to watch or to look at the 2018 game where they were able to rest players against Denver in the final game of the regular season. And my memory, I thought that they had rested guys in the second half and just like for the entire second half. I forgot that they started that game so poorly on offense. I think there was an interception from Rivers and then a fumble or something like that, that they kept wanting to play in the game to make sure they got things tuned up a bit. They ended up scoring 23 points, like getting 2 or 3 more touchdowns. And then they're like, okay, that's enough. Now we can head to the postseason. So I could definitely see the Chargers doing that, like you said, just, tuning it up a little bit, maybe score a couple, see how it goes. Heck, if it's one series and it's a clean operation and they score, everything they wanted to do, fine, pull them. But I do want to see them get going just a bit more, figure out that run game just a bit more, throw into the end zone, score. That would be nice.
And I think the opponent matters here too, because like if the Chargers were sort of playing the Chiefs, right, who are a team that is, still going to be playing for something this week, they're going to be playing for the 1 seed. So, I mean, that game against the Raiders for them is someone where they're going to play all their starters, until maybe they're up on Jarrett Stidham's Raiders like 40 points. But until then, they're going to play their starters. With the Broncos, like, I don't know how much you're tuning your offense up against them relative to like if you were playing a team like the Chiefs or Raiders this week, considering the state of the Broncos, right? But yeah, I definitely think at the very least, you'll probably still, even in the event where the Ravens do lose, have the starters play for a quarter or a half, depending on, how things go. And they can also sort of play that by ear during the game. If they feel like there's a lot of, offensive line pressure, for example, maybe they decide to pull Herbert. If they, feel through other circumstances that they just, want to rest guys, you can also play that through, how the game script goes and how things are going as well. So, I don't know if there's like a perfect, okay, well, they'll pull the people out at this quarter or this half, or do it in the third quarter, because they could, have tons of different scenarios, like we said, coming into the game. But yeah, I definitely feel like you probably want that offensive tune-up, but I feel like it was good that they had the Rams game going into this one where the offense finally, not as totally fixed, but finally clicked prior to this game, where you could potentially get some rest either, through parts of the game or the second half, whatever it might be.
Yeah, like Tyler's pointing out, the inability to kind of know with the inability to know if you have to play them or not, obviously, is a little bit tougher with the inactives. And like Alex mentioned, you don't have a 90-man roster, so I kind of do expect them to play some starters. Obviously, I think there are certain players who've been a little bit banged up who you could probably get away with resting. You probably want to rest Trey Pipkins with his knee issue. I don't know if Trey wants to rest, given the way that he kind of came back from that on Sunday. Kilo Mack, Sebastian Joseph Day, obviously mentioned Derwin James, but to me, it's a very interesting balance of trying to continue to play your best ball, which was Brandon Staley has talked about at least last week, and then obviously trying to maintain some health. So we'll obviously see what happens throughout the week. It does sound like Lamar Jackson is not going to play this week, so it is going to be another week for Tyler Huntley against the Bengals, and that hasn't exactly gone well. Certainly not as well as guys like me would have hoped that he would be playing. So I have a tough time imagining the Ravens winning this weekend. Obviously, there's a lot of money shifting towards the Broncos side. I think Arjun pointed this out. Chargers opened up as 3.5-point favorites, and now it's Broncos minus 2.5, I think is what the tweet said. So Vegas certainly expects the Chargers to not be playing starters, at least not be playing Justin Herbert, who, for what it's worth, did show up on the injury report today with a shoulder injury. Brandon Staley did say that it's not serious. He expects him to be a full participant in practice this week. But it seems like Vegas expects the Chargers to be resting starters.
Yeah, and internally they feel the same. So I think if Brandon Staley is saying it out loud, if Vegas is shifting that way, if internally they feel that way, I think we're going to expect a good chunk of starters to be rested at some point during this game. Not a surprise.
Yeah, generally when Vegas shifts one way or the other, they definitely know something is up regarding injuries or something else. So I do think that is the case here. The other thing that I thought, in addition to, Tyler pointing out the, who's going to be in and out on game days, the Chargers probably have to do practice squad elevations 24 hours before the game like they normally do. So I'll be curious to see who they elevate, given the circumstance of both scenarios, having to obviously potentially play that Broncos game, who are the practice squad elevations if, they sort of don't have to do that, but obviously they won't know that on Saturday. So I'll be curious to see how they handle that in terms of elevating guys and moving guys around on the roster, preparing for both situations.
Yeah, because in theory, you'd want to see some, well, okay, if you're the team and not us, the fans, you'd want to see some of Easton Stick, but he's been active every single week. So you'd have to find someone to, who do you inactivate in that particular scenario? Yeah. I don't know. And obviously you're going to keep Herbert active. So do they carry 3 quarterbacks knowing they're probably going to sit Herbert? I guess. But the question then becomes, like Alex is talking about, who do you elevate? Who do you inactivate? How do you play that game?
Yeah. I was going to bring that up too, because we've gotten a few people saying that they're going to be at the game. And I think in general, like, yeah, I understand not wanting to watch Chase Daniel for 3 hours. I mean, they did nothing but screen passes and swing passes for Chase Daniel on Sunday against the Rams. I think this is kind of a spot where you do start Easton Stick instead of Chase Daniel. Chase Daniel obviously probably trending towards retirement. I mean, he's doing the TV thing now, or at least was doing. So I think this is kind of a spot where you lean into the young guys, lean into the guys who haven't gotten a ton of reps. Obviously, I hope JT Woods and Isaiah Spiller's careers pan out a little bit better than Easton Sticks has in terms of reps in the future. But I think you just play all the young guys, man. Like, if you're gonna rest them, then give all these young guys as many reps as they possibly can handle. And obviously you want to keep some of the veterans in there to continue to get their reps, but Nick Neiman, Isaiah Spiller, all these guys, Stone Smart, they should get as many reps as possible this week. Easton Stick included, in my opinion. If you're going to head into this and say, hey, we're going to rest some guys, like, just keep all the second team at standby, but play as many young guys as you can.
Yep, I would agree. And as soon as you pull one of the starting offensive linemen, please pull Herbert. Like, if you want to put out Herbert in the starting offense, that's fine. As soon as Foster Sirrell goes in, please pull Justin Herbert from the game.
Yeah, definitely want to, pull Justin Herbert in that case if that happens. We would want to see someone like Spiller get snaps. I'll be curious to see if that is on the Chargers' agenda, if they want to do that, because then the counterpoint to that is, well, if Larry Roundtree is going to be your third running back in the playoffs, which is something that we're probably going to have going forward because they like him on special teams, then do you get him reps in the event that Eckler or Spiller get injured? Or sorry, Eckler or Kelly get injured, in a playoff game, I should say. So I'll be curious to see how they manage playing the young guys versus, in a situation like the running backs, and you can apply this to some of the other positions on the roster as well, playing some of the younger guys that, maybe aren't as experienced, but could need to play in a playoff game.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of answered Renee's question here a little bit, but I wanted to shout him out for the super chat as well. LA Chargers fan wants to know in this regard, could the offense have any plays they are saving? So, I went back and obviously watched the game tape from last night, and the game plan was pretty different than what I remember watching it in person. It was a lot more gap and power schemes, was not a whole lot of zone options on the ground. So I think that's one twist that they've kind of leaned into a little bit more and more each week. I don't think there's necessarily any specific plays other than maybe like some trick plays that they haven't run. Like, they only did the Philly special one time last year. I don't know if they have anything like that they're saving, and they're not obviously going to use those for the Broncos game, but I would imagine the game plan is pretty vanilla if you're not playing Justin Herbert and company.
Oh, yeah. No, that'd be hilarious. They unleash the playbook with Easton Stick. What we've been waiting for this whole time.
This week is the Easton Stick is Taysom Hill week, baby. Let's run it.
Oh, man. There is a play from training camp that they haven't done yet, and that's that Herbert has the option to pitch it to Mike Williams on a run. I swear they ran it once in practice. They have not run it yet, but that exists. So if it pops up, hit the like button on this video. It probably won't, because that sounds like a horrible idea. But they tried it once in practice.
So, like, they jet motion him and then pitch it to him.
All I remember is that Herbert and Mike Williams are running outside to the right, and Herbert has the option to pitch it to Mike Williams and he keeps it instead. But Mike Williams is in his hip pocket like a running back would be.
Huh. I was laughing though when when they did the tunnel screen to Mike Williams on Sunday against the Rams. My guy had like a huge lane and blockers, and he was like, "No, I'm not going back inside. I'm just gonna stick outside." So clearly something that Mike Williams is not super comfortable with in that role, but it is what it is.
You're forgiven for the game he had.
Good news is that if they have to pull, or they get the chance to pull Mike Williams and Keenan Allen, Joe Lombardi, you can run as many Josh Palmer screens as you want for the rest of the game.
Yeah, honestly, they should go to Josh Palmer. All right, so again, that's kind of our playoff scenarios here. In terms of the injuries, there aren't necessarily a ton to really talk about. From a Chargers perspective, from a Broncos perspective, this is the other thing, is that several key Broncos players outside of the ones who are already injured are popping up on the injury report as well. So they did place Dalton Reisner on injured reserve today. And also in that regard, Damari Mathis, Calvin Anderson, who's been their starting left tackle, Quinn Miners, Mike Purcell, Kareem Jackson, K'Wan Williams, and DJ Jones all did not practice today. So that's the other thing to really keep in mind here, is that the Broncos are even perhaps more injured than the Chargers were about 6 weeks ago. So this is going to be a very interesting preseason game feel, if you will. It just is unfortunate for both of these teams, obviously, the way that the injuries have panned out. But if the Chargers do have to win, it's not like this is going to be the Broncos, A team. It's going to be a lot of JV guys and Russ.
Yeah, the videos of Russell Wilson practicing by himself and giving like calls out pregame. And it's just him like breaking up the huddle. That'll be him on Sunday, I think, at the rate that Broncos are going with their injuries, because boy, are they banged up. I do feel bad because we've been there. The Chargers get to play their preseason team because they get to and because they want to. The Broncos have to, unfortunately. Yeah. So again, if the Chargers need to win, for the third week in a row, they're playing the team's backups. Baker Mayfield and the Rams, Nick Foles and the Colts without Jonathan Taylor, the Titans without anybody, and one quarterback with one hobbled foot. Again, if they need this game, they absolutely can win it, because the Broncos, I do feel bad for them. There's barely any players left for that team.
Yeah, I kind of wonder why Russell Wilson's playing. They've invested $245 million in him, and you have
that's why
nothing protecting him. Yeah, but it's like you have nothing protecting him on the offensive line now. The whole team around him is trash. I mean, he's been asked too, but you can't really do anything at this point. And you fired the coach. You're not playing for anything. I mean, I'm not saying you want to tank the game, because I'm sure the Broncos are still playing for pride and whatever it might be. But I'm kind of curious as to why he's playing still. Maybe just because they don't have anyone else and they need someone to go out there. As far as the injury situation, this is why I think the Chargers, even if the Ravens do win, could make quick work against the Broncos. Don't want to jinx myself, or don't want to jinx ourselves, because the Chiefs were in a close game against them last week. Crazy things have happened in Denver before, as we know. So, you never want to count them out. But this is just a game where I don't know if we're going to learn a whole lot about the Chargers offense, or, anything much about the Chargers defense, just because of the direction the Broncos are headed. Unfortunately, it might be a little bit different if you're playing the Raiders, if you're playing the Chiefs this week. But the Broncos are just kind of a different situation all around. So, yeah, definitely curious whether the Chargers win, or whether the Ravens win or lose, how much the Chargers will end up playing their guys if it turns into some kind of close game, or if the Chargers could kind of do what the Rams did a few weeks ago, which is just keep Prilla and the Broncos will implode. That's sort of what happens. So, hoping for that kind of outcome in the event that the Ravens do win, but obviously hoping that, the Ravens lose, and then that this is, a kind of a non-starter anyway.
Yeah, very fair. There is obviously this sentiment that the Broncos are kind of checked out, and I think that would have been more applicable if last week were their Rams game, right? When they got completely blown out of the water. But, they did just play the Chiefs tough. So they still have a lot of, prideful guys out there. They're still trying to fight. Justin Simmons had an interception last week. We'll see if any of these guys out in the injury report play. But obviously you still have Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy. But, the recipe for the Broncos has obviously changed a lot. And that includes Russell Wilson having an ADOT of 4.5 last week against the Chiefs. So they're clearly going to have a very different offensive approach, without, all of these key players and obviously the offensive linemen in general. So again, we'll keep you guys posted in terms of the injuries and everything that we're hearing. But this is going to be a banged up matchup on either side, regardless of if the Chargers are playing key starters or not.
God bless those of you. Oh, sorry. God bless those of you that are going and paid money to go see this game.
Yeah, I think obviously, the NFL and all of us included probably expected this to be a much higher profile game to close out the season than it will end up being.
Yeah, apparently if we just play Denver the final game of the year, that means we're going to the postseason. So that's good.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so on the Chargers side of things, some good news here. That is obviously public news. Is obviously Derwin James was a full estimated participant. The Chargers did do a walkthrough today, so they did not practice fully. But Derwin James listed as a full. It sounds like he's progressing well through concussion protocol, and obviously, if the Chargers need him to play, it sounds like he probably will end up being able to play this week. Bryce Callahan, Justin Herbert, Eamon Ogbongbemiga, Troy Reeder, and Jamari Salyer are all listed on the injury report as well, but also listed as full participants. So the big one to keep an eye on, obviously, is Trey Pipkins and his knee issue that's really unfortunately bothered him all throughout the season, pretty much since week 5, I believe it was, against the Browns. He's been dealing with this kind of MCL knee sprain, but he was listed as a limited participant this week. Again, I feel like that probably is somebody you want to head into this week, maybe resting, giving him a week off, getting him healthy for the playoff game if you can. But it does sound like he's going to try and continue to play. Incredibly tough individual for him to limp off the field and barely be able to walk and then come back into that game and play really, really well, in my opinion. So really that's the big one for the Chargers. Xander Horvath, also a limited participant. Sounds like he's progressing well too, though. So really, Trey Pipkins is the only active roster injury to keep an eye on for the Chargers. And
I think of course. Yeah, I think we ended up seeing, outside of maybe one series, everyone gets their reps in or whatever. I think we see Herbert, Lindsley, and Pipkins all pulled at the same time, whenever that is, whether it's before the game or a couple series in.
Yeah, and I think all the guys on the injury report that you kind of mentioned are guys that, depending on the results of the Ravens game, they can decide to be pretty cautious. Derwin James, obviously, from protocol, even if he passes that, you could decide to potentially rest him in this game if it were not to matter. But yeah, overall, I think that the Chargers' injuries this game are going to be interesting to watch and see how they move around with those. Was interested to see Herbert with the shoulder thing on the injury report, but that seems to be more precautionary than anything at this point.
Yeah, he was a little bit slow to get up after I feel like that crazy player where he almost got sacked and then still managed to get that ball out to Joshua Kelly, which was just so hilarious to watch on film. Mm-hmm. He was a little slow to walk off the field after that instance. So sounds like he's going to be fine, and thankfully it's not his throwing shoulder, at least. Brandon Staley called it normal bumps and bruises, but obviously, anytime Justin is on the injury report, it's definitely not ideal.
Yeah, there was a hit or a sack on the far side where Herbert was slow to get up. I can't remember which one. Maybe it was that play, but I remember Herbert being on the ground. So I don't remember, but there was definitely a play where Herbert was slow to get up, and so get him off the field as soon as possible.
Just saw Peter's response back to us, and was cracking up a little bit. So hope you're having a good evening there, Peter. All right. So again, a little bit of a different feel. We don't know who's playing in this game. So we'll try our best in terms of like key matchups and victory formation and things like that. Try and essentially look at this game as if the Chargers have to win. So I think really the way to kind of approach this is convincing ourselves that the Ravens will win this game, and the Chargers do obviously have to play their guys. So Alex, we'll start with you here for your victory formation pick. Again, assuming that the Ravens win in this instance, how did the Chargers obviously come out victorious against the Broncos on Sunday afternoon?
Pass rush pressure on Russell Wilson. I feel like that's a pretty obvious answer. You got Khalil Mack, and when Russell Wilson's been under pressure this season, as we saw in multiple games, as we saw even in the Rams game in situations where he hasn't been under pressure, he's been turning the ball over. So, I mean, the quickest way to making this game non-competitive is a turnover battle, getting Russ to turn the ball over. And so I think that Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack on the edges with the state of this Broncos offensive line are the quickest keys to doing that in this game. So for me, it's just going to be pressuring us. Make sure you kind of, bring everyone on every play, honestly, because the Broncos don't have many players left to cover at this point other than probably Jerry Jeudy. So that's kind of the only person you're really worried about, maybe Alberto and some like tight end formations that they could run. The Chargers have had a little bit of trouble stopping tight ends recently. So maybe that's kind of someone that you want to keep an eye on. But other than that, yeah, I think this game, in terms of whether the Broncos offense can compete with the Chargers offense, ultimately comes down to Russ's performance at the end of the day, because I think he'll have to play at a Seattle type of level to be able to keep up with the Chargers, which is not something we've seen from him this season. And he would have to be Seattle Russ, particularly under pressure too. And that's something we haven't seen from him this season. So pressure Russ and you win the game, and everyone can probably rest by the third or fourth. So to me, that's key in this matchup in terms of whether the Broncos can keep up with Herbert.
Yeah. I'm both rooting for the rush to do well and also not, because they keep, Morgan Fox keeps pricing himself out of the Chargers range with every sack he gets every week. And Kyle Van Noy is going to go with probably his fifth week with a sack. So, pressure, maybe not sacks. I want to keep these guys around.
Yeah, that'd be nice. For what it's worth, again, it's last week. It sounds like the Broncos were doing a lot more quick game, a lot more emphasis on the run game. The Chiefs did rack up 18 total pressures, 4 sacks, and 4 additional hits. So they did get after Russ at a pretty high level. I mean, they hit him 8 total times. So, the Chargers being able to get that kind of output would be fantastic as well. So really quickly wanted to point this out. Our guy Jameson obviously has done great work with Tyler this year on all of the injuries. Unfortunately, was a very busy man in that regard. He thinks that Trey Pipkins will likely rest. Don't think it was a full re-aggravation, as he did go back in the game, which is fantastic to hear. But he does say an extra week of rest with an MCL will make a big difference for him. So maybe somebody that we can kind of bank on resting almost regardless of what happens in the Bengals and Ravens game.
Yeah, thanks for chiming in, Jameson. I think maybe the first time I've seen you in the live chat, but I could be wrong. But yes, excellent work. Your last video got like 4,000 something views, so appreciate it. Keep up the good work.
Yeah. All right, Tyler, your victory formation segment here.
It's partially a tune-up thing as well, and that's the only thing that the defense really had difficulty with. I guess it's kind of a combination of things versus the Rams, and it did have me a bit more concerned on rewatch. It's a combination of how they played the run in terms of the personnel that they used, how they played certain run fits and responsibilities, and then just the missed tackles in that game. There was that pitch to Akers on their first or second drive that went for 22 yards, where on 2 separate occasions, one Chargers defender would run into another one and take them out of the play. That happened again, on the outside, and the Alohi Gilman, got to Akers after like 15 or 18 yards. He ended up, slowing him down, but still missing the tackle. Just not clean. We really wanted to see better from this team, specifically this run defense. Just the window dressing, the pre-snap action. It was all really tough for the Chargers. They really got gashed when they only had 2 defensive tackles, especially when it wasn't someone like Fehoko in there. When they added a 3rd defensive tackle too, they would also, like, the Rams would go, okay, you have 3 defensive tackles. It looks like you're going to stop the run. That's fine. And that's when they did like that pitch out to Akers. So it was kind of sweet to watch the Rams run the football because they had a lot of fun stuff that they did. And if the Chargers want to take that, hey, go for it with the way they're tight ends. And maybe if Slater comes back, you can do those things. But it's pretty sweet what they were doing, but not fun if you're watching it as a Chargers fan. If the Rams were able to do that the entire game and they actually had talent, I think they would have given the Chargers a lot more problems. Especially with the Chargers playing like half a game at maybe of Joey Bosa and Kyle Van Noy, I think it's kind of a matchup thing too, but Chris Rumph needs to play a lot better than he has and step up in a huge way against the run, because in the postseason, as soon as that rotation comes in, and let's say Joey's out, let's say Clemac's out for whatever reason, they're just rotating guys in. You see Chris Rumph, you're running right at him. And I'm talking like worse than Jerry Tillery situation for this particular one, because at least Jerry Tillery kind of had some size there. Chris Rumph it's been rough. And I'm not saying like, oh, Kyle Van Noy's been so good, but like here it is with Chris Rumph. And I know people don't like when I talk negatively about him, but like I have to the same way with like Jerry Tillery. You remember how much we didn't like Jaleel Adai's missed tackle rate playing free safety?
Yeah.
Chris Rumph's missed tackle rate, which is the worst in the NFL right now at any defensive position, is 54% higher than Adai's missed tackle rate that year when he played free safety. So that's not good. And his run stop rate is 1, which means it would take 1,000 snaps for him to get 10 run stops, which is second worst in the league. For reference, Jerry Tillery's run stop rate last year was 4.8, and Chris Rumph's is now 1.0. So, I want to see them play the run better. I want to see them use, someone like Braden Fehoko a little bit more. He only has had 12 run defensive snaps the last 2 weeks, 12 each the last 2 weeks. I think he had like 24 against the Titans. And of course, that looked great. I don't know why he has more pass rush snaps than run defense snaps, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Maybe that's a Rams, Colts sort of thing where they would opt and check out of certain looks. Regardless, long story short, the Chargers against the Rams were the second worst in EPA per play against the run, and they were second worst in success rate, or gave up the highest or second highest success rate, I should say. So they got to clean that up. You're going into the postseason. If you're going to go out there and play these playoff teams who can run, and all of them can, work on your run fits, work on your 3 defensive tackle packages, clean things up. I think that's just as important, if not more, than the offense tuning things up as well.
Alex, did you have something to say there?
Yeah, no, I mean, just finishing on what Tyler said, we sort of talked about the run defense, after the Rams game last week, and there was sort of like, well, we'll see what happens when we watch the film, and you watch the film, and it was still pretty ugly. Like, yeah, you could take out the Cam Akers big run, and then maybe he's only averaging this, but like, still pretty bad, like 4.5 yards per carry, and you have an explosive play in there, right? So, and like Steven said, you're going to be playing these running backs in the playoffs, and the Chargers' first round opponent, should they clinch the 5th seed, will either be Derrick Henry or it will be Travis Etienne, right? So you have to prepare to face, different types of running backs, but explosive guys nonetheless. And you would like to see them, clean it up this week if they can.
Yeah, when I watched the film back, it was really frustrating to watch. I thought Alohi Gilman was probably the best of that middle 4, if you will, in terms of the linebackers and the 2 safeties, but there were, 4 or 5 instances where both Kenneth Murray and Nasir Adderley kind of took themselves out of the play because they misdiagnosed and, they go too far this way and then the play is going the other way. So there was a lot of poor, mental reps from, the middle 4, and that includes Drew Tranquill. I thought, Drew Tranquill had, one of his worst games of the season as well. So that's aside from Chris Rumph, his incredibly high missed tackle rate. I will say he's in the position to make these plays. It's for whatever reason he's just not able to finish them. So I guess if you're a glass half full guy, then you can point to Chris Rumph kind of getting into that position and being at least ready to make the play and not just being able to finish the job. So hopefully Chris Rumph is able to kind of turn that corner. But in terms of the middle 4, man, it was just time and time again they would motion somebody, then they would motion somebody else, and you could tell the middle 4 were just not handling that properly. And, there were a couple of times, like Tyler highlighted, where the linebackers would run into somebody or the safeties would run into somebody and essentially just take themselves out of the play. And you can't do that against a super sound scheme like the Rams have or like the Jacksonville Jaguars have. So I think that's a great point, Tyler, because this is an opportunity for them to bounce back. And, I think the improvement of the run defense has not been like monumental over this win streak. but they can play at an average level, a league average level, and they didn't on Sunday against the Rams. So need to get that bounce back to what it's been over the previous 4 or 5 weeks.
Yeah, and they did give the Broncos quite a fit. I think the Broncos have been for most of the year, despite their injuries, better scheme, stronger, more sound, and they gave them a ton of fits too. So it's not like this was a cakewalk matchup, but still you'd like to see them do better. And like you said, Drew Tranquil wasn't his best game, and a lot of guys that were stepping up and were playing better kind of went backwards this game. So you want to keep that consistent heading into the postseason.
Yeah, absolutely. I think for me, I mentioned this in terms of the offense, but the Chargers have to continue to figure out what kind of rushing attack they want to be and how to successfully attack these games. And I'm like I've always said, never calling for like a 50-50 split here. However, if Chase Daniel is starting, I think you probably do want to see a 50-50 split with the run game. So I really enjoyed what they did. And they had a really good mix of power concepts where they would actually bring in the 3 tight ends. Thought Donald Parham had a really fantastic game, and frankly, this was the first time you really felt his physical presence that he's able to bring as a blocker. Then they would balance it out with running out of shotgun and 11 personnel. That was Austin Eckler's first touchdown. Was this really great counter concept out of 11 personnel to the weak side. Trey Pipkins, Matt Filer had some great blocks to spring Austin Eckler for the touchdown. So they've really started to find their way with the shotgun run game, and I think that's something that they need to keep working on. For whatever reason, it didn't work at all with Larry Roundtree whenever he was hit at the end of the game. So if you're resting Austin Eckler, I do think we still need to see this offensive line and this scheme kind of get after it a little bit more, and be able to put this Broncos defense that's kind of really banged up out of its misery essentially. So regardless of who's playing, I do want to see this be a sound schematic approach on the ground, and really just kind of continue this momentum into the postseason that way.
Yeah, and I'll just say, speaking about that from purely a running back standpoint, right? We have talked about Austin Eckler. Obviously, had the big game last week. If we're sort of talking about this from what we'd like to see from the other running backs, assuming Austin Eckler can either rest or maybe he plays the first 2 or 3 quarters of this game, depending on what the Chargers need, then I'd like to see a bit of a confidence boosting game from Joshua Kelly heading into the postseason, because Joshua Kelly is someone who's going to have to play a pretty big role in the playoffs, even if they're going to kind of run the ball through Eckler and run a lot of the offense through Eckler. He's going to be someone who's basically their running back 2 at this point, and he's kind of coming off of a stretch here of 2 or 3 not so great games in terms of his vision, just not having the most confidence in his decision making in this scheme whenever he does either bounce outside or whatever he decides to do on a certain play. So I just like to see that confidence, assuming a lot some of the offensive line is at least out there and they can get some Chase Daniel ball, Joshua Kelly, Roundtree. If that is what happens, I'd like to see those 2 guys, get some kind of confidence in the postseason. And I hate to say give Larry Roundtree more carries. But at the same time, it's like, okay, well, we're probably going to have to see what we, give more confidence to Joshua Kelly. And Larry Roundtree is very likely this team's running back 3 for as many playoff games as they do play. So you're probably going to have to give some carries to him as well in this game.
That's the thing too, is that everyone wants to see Spiller, and I think we definitely could, going into this game, but they have Larry Roundtree playing right now because they want guys who can contribute right now, particularly on special teams, but also they kind of feel that way on offense too. So I don't know how much Spiller we're going to see, but as far as Roundtree goes, I feel bad that he comes in, they're up by 21. Chase Daniel comes in, they pull all the offensive linemen. They're like, okay, we're going to hand it to you 10 times. Just go die out there. And of course, it's not really going to work. So like Alex said, I do want to see him get some, confidence reps, if you will, some handoffs that are in like a normal game script. Again, he's probably still with the backups in this case, but at least it's not like the game clock ending, chewing out the clock sort of drives it. And maybe we'll go from 1.5 yards to carry to 2.5.
Yeah, maybe we get some more of those awesome Larry Roundtree celebrations.
Yeah,
the best.
I hope we get as many Larry Roundtree celebrations as we want. That's the best thing going into the postseason. Give us more of those confidence. Point to your watch as many you want, as long as everyone stays healthy and Larry Roundtree has fun. That's all we need this week.
Yeah, and regarding Joshua Kelly, I will say there's been some unfortunate vision choices, if you want to call them that way, that Kelly's made over the past couple of weeks. I feel like he's gone back to trying to force it a little bit too frequently. There was obviously that time against the Colts that I highlighted on Twitter where he bounced it way too far and kind of got out left on an island, and that's not really who Joshua Kelly is. And even sometimes on Sunday against the Rams, there were just some decision making process errors in my opinion from Joshua Kelly. So I would like to see him get really involved. I mean, he's not going to be somebody that I think you're ever going to see like 15, 20 touches out of when Austin Eckler is healthy. But I think we need to know, and I think the team needs to know if he is able to really handle that kind of workload too. So again, if you're resting Austin Eckler, I feel like Joshua Kelly is going to touch the ball a lot anyway. But I would like to see Joshua Kelly kind of get back to his, pre-injury self where he's just really confident, makes the smart decisions, the easy decisions, and is able to get those, easy yards as much as possible. So again, kind of nitpicking a little bit. I still think he's playing well. I'm not saying that he's playing bad or anything like that, but there are some decision errors that I think, even he would say that he would like to take back a little bit more.
Yeah, I would agree. I think you pointed out early against the Colts, it was a bit more concerning. Last week, not as much, but you do want to see just everything get ironed out. At this point, if it is a tune-up game, yeah, we want to see those things get tuned up. So that's a good call.
All right, we'll dive in here next to some key matchups again, as much as we can in this instance. Obviously, Alex kind of highlighted the pass rush there. I think that's certain area that you could highlight as well. But Tyler, what's your key matchup heading into this weekend?
Yeah, related to the run game, I'm really curious because we know the tight ends will play, at least 3 of them, probably all 4 of them. I'm curious how they continue to use their tight ends because I really thought these guys played well on Sunday for sure. I thought Trey McKitty had his best game of the season, which isn't saying a ton, but he did legitimately have flashes of his rookie season. There were moments like on, a touchdown run from Austin Eckler where he was an integral part of that run blocking, which is great. That's what you need to see. And I'm really curious how they use these guys because it just felt like because Xander Horvath was not in there, that they had these guys on the move more, in the backfield more. Everyone got reps, I think, from the backfield, if I'm not mistaken. Even Gerald Everett, even the third quarter. So, I mean, they had Trey McKitty block on one of Austin Eckler's first runs. He was the wide receiver out wide, and they motioned him all the way down and across the line of behind the line of scrimmage to make a block on an Austin Eckler run. And that just seems to suit him a bit more. And I thought he just looked better overall in this game. Again, not a big statement to say it was his best game of the season, but we're talking he was a full liability at points throughout the year. And it's funny we're talking about tight ends because of what I was talking to you guys about before the show and Discord and whatnot. But I want to see these guys continue to play well because Staley loved the physicality he said he saw from the offensive line and the blocking groups and the tight ends on Sunday. So I want to see that continue. And I'm really curious how they continue to use these tight ends because, Horvath was gone. They tried something a bit different. And I'm not saying these guys all played great fullback, reps or whatever, but the run game did work and it did look really good. The rush offense, as you pointed out, Steven, went up by 5 spots in rushing DVOA. So I want to see how they use, 7, 88, 48, 89. How are they using these guys on the field? Does it continue? And if Horvath is back, they just go back to him, or do they try to work with this a bit more?
Yeah, I'm excited to see the tight ends this week as well, especially if we're potentially looking at a transitional year. We don't really know what's happening with Donald Parham. Obviously, Trey McKitty's been up and down, mostly down this season. I feel like McKitty's had some decent moments over the last month or so. I certainly feel like he's not been as bad as, the previous few months than that. So I think that's a fair assessment there. But, Stone's smart. We haven't really seen him get a ton of work as a blocker. So I do think that's an important one for sure. I think for me, the key matchup is going to be Josh Palmer versus whatever cornerback is playing for the Denver Broncos, whether that's Patrick Surtain. I hope that's not Patrick Surtain. I hope that's not where they kind of, look to attack with Josh Palmer. But just again, some things that we want to see tuned up here. Josh Palmer only had the one target last week. He did not have any single catches. The week before that against the Colts, he only had 3 targets and it was 2 catches for 16 yards. So he had been a really important, obviously, piece while Keenan Allen and Mike Williams were back, or excuse me, were out. But even the last few weeks since they've been back, against the Dolphins, he had 4 catches for 53 yards. Against the Titans, he had 5 for 49. And, I definitely want to see them get him more involved, especially if Keenan and Mike are going to be, on a bit more of a snap restriction this week. So, he's somebody that I think teams are going to really have to, in an ideal world for the Chargers, that teams will have to honor. And I don't know if the current way that they are using him is going to, kind of force teams to respect that third receiver. So, if it's Damari Mathis, if he's able to clear concussion protocol, if it's Lamar Jackson, the other Lamar Jackson, if you will, I would like to see Josh Palmer get after it this week and ideally get, 6-7 targets, 50, 60 yards, and really be able to get back to the kind of usage rate that we saw earlier in the season.
Yeah, just target Damari Mathis and get 3 more defensive pass interference calls. Works like a charm.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Alex, your key matchup of the day.
Yeah, I'm kind of going to lean into what I said about pass rushing Russell Wilson. So I'm going to talk about the edges a little bit, because sort of how we talked about the running backs, this is the group where there's the most chance for, chaos and resting people and figuring out how many reps you want to play people. Because, I mean, Khalil Mack, if I'm not mistaken, has played all 16 games at this point, right? Yep. So this could be, a situation where, do you want to rest Khalil Mack maybe in this game either way? If you want to get him that rest potentially heading into wild card weekend, don't know if that's something they'll do in the event that the Ravens, don't think it would be something to do if the Ravens do win. But assuming the Ravens lose, I would, try to get Khalil Mack out of there as soon as possible. You want to get him just as a veteran, with the workload he's had this season. Joey Bosa, right? Obviously a big question mark there in terms of how much he's going to play in this game, strictly because of, conditioning, coming back from the injury. The Chargers got up, 21 last game. Obviously we're up 31-10 and Joey Bosa was still in there, right? Getting his reps, for whatever risk you might have taken. But, he looked good in those reps. Obviously, co-led the team in pressures with Morgan Fox. So I'll be curious to see in this season finale, assuming the Chargers don't have anything to play for, or maybe they do, depending on the result of the Ravens game, how much they want to play Joey Bosa in either instance, I think is key. And then depending on the playing time that somebody or people like Joey Bosa and Khalil Mack get, that obviously affects the next level of edge rushers in Kyle Van Noy, who's obviously been on a hot streak recently the last 4 games. And then Chris Rump. We sort of talked about Chris Rump, in Tyler's bit in this show, but you'd also like to see Chris Rump gain some confidence if he's able to maybe start for a half or a couple quarters, whatever it might be, or the last quarter of the game. If he can raise that, if he can raise the run stop rate from 1% to 2%, maybe we're going places. If he can, if he could just look playable in a potential playoff setting, that's all I'd like to see. It's just getting a little bit better on the edge, because I think Chris Rump struggles with, sort of his functional strength issues, but as well as, technique is a missed tackle rate. So if he does get a big to play in this game, assuming Khalil Mack and Joey Bosa maybe don't play as much, and assuming, maybe even Van Noy is sort of a lesser component in this game too, I'd love to see him, get some reps in as much as he can prior to the playoffs, because he will have to play, some postseason snaps.
Yeah, for them to have success and truly rush the passer consistently and do what they want to do with their other edge rushers, defensive tackles, whatever, Rump will have to play meaningful snaps. Maybe it's 8 to 10 in a game, but it's the playoffs. Everything matters. So if Chris Rump can go in, he has taken steps forward as a pass rusher. Don't get me wrong. Like, there are things that he does now as a pass rusher where he looks better, and statistically he's ahead of where he was last year. So if he wants to at least continue with that and that be his role and he get confidence and better reps in that way, cool, I'm all for it.
Yeah, I was looking at the just the pass rushing class from last year, how they've all been playing this year, and as a pass rusher, runs about middle of the pack, which I think is a positive step forward. It's just that run defense is not necessarily improved. And again, he's been in the right position. Just need him to be able to get into a situation where he can finish them. So I think that's a good spot. In terms of Joey and his recovery, right? I think we were all a little bit surprised that he played 24 total snaps. Looked great. I mean, had some awesome moments. Had a couple of speed to power rushes that really let me know, like, okay, like he's back. Obviously, just needs to get his sea legs under him a little bit. So I would expect him to maybe push past 30 if he is going to play, which I feel like you kind of have to play him this week. So maybe you do kind of push him a little bit more early, and then again, kind of pull him out in the second half and not let him play. So. Again, something more to be curious about how they handle this situation with Joey and his recovery this week.
Sorry, I'm on a tangent now looking at the Hall of Fame finalists.
Yeah, my guy Steve Smith keeps on getting snubbed. I don't get it, man. I don't get it.
So it's 13 of the 15. Jared Allen, Rondé Barber, Dwight Freeney, Devin Hester, Torrey Holt, Andre Johnson, Revis, Joe Thomas, Zach Thomas, DeMarcus Ware, Reggie Wayne. I thought Wayne was in. Oh, that's Harrison. Patrick Willis, Darren Woodson. I mean, I love Steve Smith.
I think Reggie Wayne's been snubbed for 2 years now. I don't remember if it's 2 year or 1 year.
Yeah, I don't know.
I mean, Steve Smith is 8th all time in receiving yards. Like, what are we doing here?
It's like his whole career, just a chip on the shoulder. Joe Thomas has to be. This is his first time, right? Because he's first ballot.
Yeah.
He's in.
Joe Thomas is arguably the best offensive lineman of like the last 20 years. So even though he played for the Browns, he should absolutely get in first ballot.
That's why he should.
Antonio Gates.
Wait. Rondé Barber's been eligible 3 times and he hasn't gotten in?
I guess. I don't know.
It's so hard to get in as
what it says here. Yeah.
So, but Ed Mies is asking about Antonio Gates. His is next year, right? That would be his class.
Sure. I feel like it's been a long time, but yeah.
Wouldn't it be from when he retired?
2018 was his last season, right? I guess he didn't play. Yeah, he didn't play 19 because that was all Hunter Henry at that time, I think.
Is it from when you retire or from when your final game is, though? I don't know.
Oh, that's right, because he did like maybe it was 19.
Because he retired in 2020.
So his last game was in 2018. So he did not play a game in 2019, but I remember him like there were like rumors of him like playing somewhere else all year long or something like that. So I think it's 5 years after you officially retire. So he might be 2 years away then. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah, he's next year would be the earliest that he would be eligible. Next January, essentially.
Sure. He's a lock. The real discussion becomes when Rivers is eligible. That'll be one we'll all be watching for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, guys. Any other thoughts here as we wrap up our show tonight in terms of previewing the Broncos game?
It's just nice, man. Like it's the 6th seed at worst. It's probably going to be the 5th seed. I mean, everything indicates that it is going to be the 5th seed. Just everyone has to do their jobs. Was it the Bengals who beat the Ravens last time to knock the Chargers out of the postseason and get the Bills in?
Yes.
Yep.
Look at that. There we go.
So now we need the other way around.
Yeah, let's get into the postseason. Well, we're in, but
Yeah, it was really funny walking into that stadium on Sunday. It definitely did not feel like a normal walking into the stadium kind of atmosphere and just like the way that overall like everybody's vibe and mood was around. So Brooke and I kind of just headed into the stadium and we're like, man, we're like, there's no stress, there's no nerves. Like obviously we wanted them to win, but it was like, oh, if they lose today, whatever, that's cool. They're still fine. But now potentially getting to rest some starters in week 18 is quite a turn of events from the last 6 weeks ago.
Yeah, it was so mellow that, like, ask my dad, I never eat at the games. I had 2 hot dogs, and I'll tell you what, like, that shows my confidence, but also I've been regretting that. Today's Wednesday. I am still regretting that decision. Me and Peter are on the same. Listen, you think I'm streaming from my room?
I think obviously we did the Rose Bowl on Monday, which we will not talk about that result. But I think we walked past like probably 35 or 40 of those like little hot dog stands that are outside the stadium. And every single time me and Brooke were like, oh man, those smell so good. But it's like, you don't want to risk it, getting a hot dog at one of those is always a very risky decision. But it was a lot of hot dog stands outside of both of those stadiums.
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend chowing down on 2 hot dogs and an energy drink and a little bit of beer. I just don't do it.
Yeah, I mean, you got the whole Thunder Alley experience, and then
I had Korean barbecue before that, and it was not a good mix of things for sure.
Alex, any final thoughts, man?
Are we just talking about the game?
Whatever you want to talk about. Any final thoughts?
Oh, okay. I mean, I would be kind of remiss if we didn't mention the Damar Hamlin thing. Obviously, that happened on Monday night. Because honestly, it has been weird to talk about it. On this podcast, on Twitter, just kind of getting back into the games. So happy that we could do that in the way that we did tonight. Obviously, people are kind of still in shock on that situation, and for Damar Hamlin and his family as well. But yeah, it has been a little weird to just get into, what did the Chargers have to do to beat the Broncos? Because this week doesn't really feel like that, or talk about the playoff scenario, but hoping for the best for Damar's family, and obviously hoping for, the best as we, continue into the season.
Yeah, I was not watching the game when that happened, and we were just getting text message updates from some of Brooke's family, and they texted us that one of the Bills players collapsed and that they were doing CPR, and it was just like, obviously we were, after the Rose Bowl, very upset about that game, and then the mood just obviously changed and shifted to, just being so concerned about Damar and his situation, and went back and looked, and he was somebody that I really wanted the Chargers to draft, and somebody that I thought that would check a lot of boxes for them in terms of being that extra safety that the Chargers frankly still need. But I think it's a reminder of how fragile these NFL careers are. Not that we necessarily needed one, but it wasn't even a super violent hit, man. It was just like a routine hit that happened to hit just the minuscule right spot, and caused a player to have a cardiac arrest situation in the middle of a football game. So was definitely scary getting all the updates. Like Alex said, I'm rooting for him to come back and be able to function at a normal human being level, and if he can play football again, that's kind of gravy on top. But first and foremost, hope he's able to recover and function at a normal level again. Sending all the thoughts and prayers to him. If you're religious, as I happen to be, I think we all need to send some of those prayers up towards Cincinnati and Buffalo, and hopefully he's able to, like I said, recover from this and live a normal life again.
Yeah, 100%. I love the way that people have rallied around the situation and his foundation. I think it's at like $6 million now.
Yeah,
I think the initial goal was like 25,000 or something, maybe for his.
Oh, it was like 2,500.
Oh wow, yeah. So to be at far beyond that is really beautiful, and I hope he can see that. Absolutely, it was such a tough thing because I wasn't watching it live either. I got about 15 minutes, just on the Twitter updates, sitting on the couch watching Twitter replays and reactions, and I just started getting emotional over the whole situation. It's so scary, so upsetting seeing the Bills players how they reacted. Just awful stuff. So yeah, absolutely prayers up for him. I hope he pulls through. It seems like he's in really good care. It seems like things are trending positive. So hopefully that keeps going. Hopefully people keep donating, and try to be the good people on social media and on your media platforms, and don't be like some other people who took it for this opportunity to say some awful things.
Yeah, honestly.
Obviously, donate to Damar's toy drive if you can. Obviously, that's great that the NFL players and owners rallied around. It was just scary watching that game as it happened and as it happened live. And I think we're at a point where Ryan Clark kind of said it best, where we become, whether you're watching the games or you're playing in the games, a little bit desensitized
100%
violence and everything that happens around us, and it only takes one moment to change all of that. So that was just kind of my thought heading into the game, because it's sort of like when there's an ambulance on the field instead of a stretcher, that's sort of where a situation becomes really scary like that. And in addition to the injury reports and stuff like that we talk about every week, for someone's life to be on the line like that, just a scary situation in general, and sending all the best.
Yeah, Solo pointing out in the chat that it's about to be $7 million.
Wow.
So
okay.
If you're able to, obviously, feel free to go and donate to that. And then obviously Jameson pointing out that it does sound like there's been some positive developments. I think they decreased his oxygen level from 100% to 50%, if I'm not mistaken, this morning. So hopefully that continues, man. And one other thing I do want to mention here, I have an uncle who's an ambulance driver himself, and those people are severely underpaid. And I thought that the EMT workers that arrived on that scene did, frankly, a fantastic job handling that kind of circumstance. And so, sending some positive vibes their way. Hopefully they're, in some good spirits today as well.
Yes, 100%.
All right. So that's going to do it for us today. We'll let you guys know when and where we'll do our usual Saturday Q&A. Again, with our, usual picks and things like that too. So should be a fun weekend. Obviously we get Saturday NFL football, and then we get, Monday national championship for the college. So best time of the year, in my opinion, is that winter football stretch. So hopefully we'll all be some good big time Bengals fans this week, and hopefully Chargers can get some much needed rest into the playoff picture. So for Tyler and Alex and myself, we'll be signing off, and we'll see you guys next time.